The software update scan completed successfully, but the expected patch is missing from Software Center, remains at 0%, waits forever, or never installs. A green scan is only one checkpoint. This beginner masterclass follows the next chain: deployment policy, available time and deadline, deployment evaluation, update applicability, content location, download, maintenance window, installation, restart, and final compliance. We will use one generic isolated lab endpoint and one deployment identifier. Never publish real deployment IDs, site codes, collections, device names, servers, domains, addresses, URLs, users, or credentials. Preserve the first failure, make one evidence change, and prove the entire path afterward. Our generic scenario is simple. A current configuration manager client completed a software update scan. The console says the update is required for the device, and an administrator created a required deployment, but the update is not offered or installed. First, confirm whether the symptom affects one endpoint, every member of the target collection, or devices in one boundary group. Record a fresh timestamp, the deployment purpose, software available time, deadline, user experience settings, and maintenance windows. Confirm that the update is still in the deployed software update group and that its content is distributed. Do not trigger repeated cycles yet. One controlled reproduction creates a readable evidence chain. Here is the complete post-scan chain. The site creates deployment policy for the targeted collection. Policy agent receives and evaluates the assignment. Scheduler interprets the available time and deadline. Updates deployment agent requests a fresh applicability scan and builds the targeted list. Updates handler requests content for applicable updates. Content access and content transfer manager request a distribution point location. Data transfer service uses bits to download into the configuration manager cache and content access verifies the hash. The client waits for an eligible maintenance window when required, then WUA handler asks Windows Update Agent to install. Restart detection and state messages finally produce compliant deployment status. Always stop at the first missing handoff. Before changing the client, prove the design in the console. Under Software Library and Software Updates, confirm that the expected update is still in the deployed software update group. Open the deployment properties and verify the target collection, purpose, software available time, deadline, notifications, download settings, and maintenance window overrides. Confirm that the test device is currently a member of the target collection. Review the deployment package and distribution status for the distribution points that can serve the client's boundary group. Add the deployment unique ID column so you can correlate one generic assignment through the client logs. Never display a real identifier in a public recording, replace it with bracketed lab text. On the client, begin with PolicyAgent.log and PolicyEvaluator.log at the timestamp of one machine policy retrieval and evaluation cycle. Microsoft documents that Policy Agent receives the deployment policy and Policy Evaluator processes it. Search for the sanitized deployment identifier, not just the update article number. If the assignment never appears, the fault is earlier than applicability, content, or installation. Recheck collection membership, deployment enablement and timing, policy generation at the site, management point communication, and client policy processing. Do not reset Windows Update components or delete the client cache when the endpoint never received the deployment assignment. Next, read Scheduler.log. A required deployment does not enforce simply because the scan succeeded. The assignment has an available time and a deadline, and Scheduler creates and fires the deadline trigger. Client settings can apply deadline randomization, so the observed start time may not equal the console time exactly. If the update should only be available before the deadline, verify notification settings and applicability before expecting automatic installation. If the deadline has passed, correlate the scheduler trigger with UpdatesDeployment.log. Never change a production deadline just to test. Use an approved isolated lab deployment or wait for the defined schedule. UpdatesDeployment.log is the central decision log. It receives the enforcement deadline, records the number of configuration items in the assignment, and starts a detection job. UpdatesHandler.log shows the requested scan, scan completion, and evaluation of update status for that job. When evaluation returns, UpdatesDeployment should record that it is making updates available and add applicable updates to the targeted list. This is the key distinction. WUA handler can show a successful scan while the deployment agent has no assignment, has not reached its schedule, or finds no applicable update. Correlate the deployment ID, job ID, timestamp, and first absent event. If the assignment is present but the update is not added to the targeted list, evaluate applicability. The update may already be installed, may not apply to the device's operating system, architecture, product, or prerequisite state, or may be superseded according to current metadata and deployment choices. A prior console result may be stale compared with the latest client scan and state processing. Review UpdatesStore.log for the update's current applicability and UpdatesDeployment.log for the assignment decision. Do not force installation of an update that Windows Update Agent reports as not applicable. Correct stale metadata, targeting, product selection, prerequisites, or supersedence strategy through supported configuration. After an update is actionable, UpdatesHandler requests its content. CA.S.log, which is the Content Access Service log, creates the download request and chooses a configuration manager cache target. ContentTransferManager.log creates a job and asks location services for content locations. LocationServices.log records the response from the management point and the eligible distribution points. If the response is empty, verify that content is distributed, the client's network is represented by an appropriate boundary, the boundary group has a content source, and fallback is configured as intended. This content location request is different from the software update point location used for scanning. When a distribution point location is returned, DataTransferService.log creates and monitors a bit's job. Follow the content ID and the CTM and DT's job identifiers rather than guessing from file names. A client stuck at 0% can have two very different causes: Content Transfer Manager never received a location, or Data Transfer Service received a URL but the transfer failed. Microsoft recommends checking CA, Content Transfer Manager, and Data Transfer Service first, then verifying boundary groups and package status. After transfer, CA verifies the content hash. Do not bypass TLS, firewall, or access controls. If testing connectivity, use only the sanitized approved lab URL and port shown by the logs. A successfully downloaded update can wait because enforcement is not allowed yet. ServiceWindowManager.log lists the maintenance windows known to the client and their start, end, type, and duration. Microsoft states that a deployment runs only when its maximum allowed runtime fits within the available window, otherwise it waits for the next eligible window. When both software update and all deployments windows exist, software updates normally use the software update window unless the relevant client setting changes that behavior. Review the deployment's deadline behavior and restart settings before blaming the client. Do not enlarge or override production windows without the service owner's approval and impact analysis. When enforcement is allowed, UpdatesHandler starts the installation job and builds the update batch. WUA-handler copies the approved content into the Windows Update Agent cache and starts the asynchronous installation. WUA-handler records the reported result and whether a restart is required. Windows Update.log provides deeper agent and installer context. If a restart is required, UpdatesDeployment.log records pending reboot according to the configured user experience. After restart, Configuration Manager runs post-reboot detection and raises enforcement and compliance state messages. Do not declare success before the rescan reports the update installed and the deployment becomes compliant. Use this matrix. If Policy Agent never receives the assignment, investigate targeting, membership, policy generation, and management point communication. If policy exists but updates deployment does not add the update to the targeted list, investigate schedule and applicability. If the update is targeted but Content Transfer Manager receives no location, investigate deployment package distribution, boundary groups, and fallback. If data transfer service fails after receiving a location, investigate the exact transfer, proxy, certificate, firewall, bits, or distribution point evidence. If content is downloaded but installation waits, inspect Service Window Manager and deployment behavior. If installation starts and fails, use the exact WUA handler and Windows Update result. A safe sequence starts by recording whether SMS agent host, Windows Update, and bits are running without changing their state. The Microsoft Deployment Monitoring Tool is a read-only configuration manager client tool that can show targeted deployments and update status. Exported XML must be sanitized before sharing. Correlate the deployment ID and timestamp across Policy Agent, Scheduler, Updates Deployment, Updates Handler, CA, Content Transfer Manager, Location Services, Data Transfer Service, Service Window Manager, WUA Handler, and Windows Update. A port test is optional lab practice only after the logs return an approved distribution point. Replace both placeholders and never expose production names, URLs, addresses, identifiers, or credentials. Remediate only the evidenced layer. Correct collection membership or policy when the assignment is absent. Correct deployment timing or applicability when the update is not actionable. Redistribute content or correct boundary group design when no valid source exists. Correct the exact bits, proxy, certificate, firewall, or distribution point cause when transfer fails. Adjust maintenance window or deadline behavior only through approved change control. For installation errors, use the exact Windows Update Agent result and supported vendor guidance. Then verify every handoff through post-reboot compliance and document the root cause, smallest change, before and after evidence, owner, and prevention. The next masterclass closes patching with monitoring and reporting at scale.